Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arthritis Action Podcast. I'm Marc, your host, and today I'm joined by Leigh Walmsley. Leigh is a former Olympian, having represented Great Britain at the London 2012 Paralympics, where she competed in archery. And as well as that, is also a volunteer here with us at Arthritis Action. Hello, Leigh. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining. So, to start us off, Leigh, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your arthritis?
Yeah, so I have had arthritis. I have several types, but I've had it since I was 11. So I had an accident where it was a freak accident on a bicycle. And, the first thing they were talking about was amputation, and I had a DVT. So it was a complicated break. So now my ankle's fused, but I then kind of noticed that it was more than just my ankle that was hurting. It was my hands started. And then, as time has gone on, it's been my shoulders, my neck. So I honestly don't think there's a joint in my body that doesn't have some kind of arthritis. So I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis probably in my late 20s. And then, obviously you move, you get different rheumatologists. Another rheumatologist said I also had psoriatic arthritis. So I think these days they just group them all together and they just call it inflammatory arthritis rather than, all these different things, because I've got Sjogren's syndrome as well. I've got palindromic, that's it, palindromic arthritis, yes. I lose count after a while with all the different rheumatological things. But yes, so, I'm trying to collect the whole set.
Sounds like you're doing a good job if that's the goal, I suppose.
And you've got to laugh about these things, because, and I guess I'm lucky in a way because, well, I don't know, maybe, I guess if I was going to have arthritis, I'm lucky in a way that I've been used to it for a long time. So I've had a long time to get used to it, to figure out how things work. And now it's just, it doesn't define me. It's just something I live with. Just call it Arthur. He's my boyfriend. He's just kind of a toxic boyfriend, but he's always there.
I have heard a few people not describe it as Arthur itself. That one's a newer for me. I like that though. But yeah, so some people who've got it from such a young age, and this, you asked, people have asked them, is that more difficult? They go, well, I wouldn't know really. That's just how it is. So it's not like it's just that's how their life is. So they don't know any other way.
They don't know any different.
So, as I said in my intro, you competed at London 2012 in archery. Let's start simple. How did you get into archery then?
I was going through a divorce, and, it hit me really hard. And I was really down on myself. I blamed myself for a lot of things, even though I'd done nothing wrong. It's the first time I'd ever gone through something like that. So, and I went and I got a counselor, and we were talking, and she helped me sort of build my confidence up. And I just thought, I thought I had this big sign on my head that says getting a divorce. And I was really kind of humiliated, thinking, oh, I failed and everybody knows it. So I kind of hid myself away, and I wasn't socializing. And I just thought, if I continue like this, I'm never going to leave my flat again. I'll go to work and that's it. And I won't socialize. And that's not me. So I need to find a hobby to get me out of the house. And I'm thinking, what do I actually like? Am I good at anything? And you really have to then take a look at yourself as an individual, because you've given all this stuff to your marriage, and I'm like, no, this is me now. And I'm thinking, what did I used to like? Oh, and I'm trying to think, well, I was a Girl Scout, and I remember when we did archery, and I absolutely loved it. So I'm like, okay, I don't have to run. So, because I can't do that. So I just thought, well, it's physical, but it's not hurting the things that kind of hurt me most. At least I thought anyway. And then I just kind of was looking around and I'm like, there are actually a lot of archery clubs around. So if you're going to do any archery in the UK on a club level, you have to go through a beginner's course.
Right.
Usually it's about 6 to 8 weeks, and you learn about the equipment, you learn how to string a bow, all safety on the range. So you need to go through that because obviously pointy sticks, you don't want anybody to get hurt. So because I'm right-handed, I was using a right-handed bow and was missing. And I'm like, oh, this target's only 10 feet away. I'm really disappointed. I thought I'd be okay with this. And then one of the club members came and he said, here's a left-handed bow. Do me a favor. He said, find a spot kind of in the distance, point your finger at it and close each eye. And which eye makes your finger cover that thing? I'm like, my left eye. And they're like, well, you are cross dominant. So it's better to use your eyedness than your handedness. So they gave me a left-handed bow and no problem.
Interesting.
But the good thing is that it worked out that way is because about to do with arthritis, I had dislocated my right shoulder a few years before, just reaching up to get a book off a shelf, not even a particularly high shelf. And I happened to see my rheumatologist, and he's like, and so when I told him, oh, I'm going to start doing archery, and he's like, you need to be careful. And he's like, you really should only do it hold the bow with this one. I'm like, well, I am because I'm left eye dominant. And he's like, well, you lucked out with that one.
Yeah, definitely.
But even so, you do need to have more flexibility. So I had to move, and this is like how adaptable sports can be. With speaking of parasport and Paralympic sport, you either adapt the game or you adapt the person. So I would have to sort of stand, I would turn my body to make up for not being able, because I can't, my alignment across I can't pull back enough. So I'm kind of out of alignment. Whereas somebody who has good flexible shoulders could stretch both arms out and have it straight. So if you stood against a wall, you could put your arms against the wall. I can't do that.
Right.
Mine are kind of collapsed in a bit. So you just have to make up with it for how you stand, where your string comes, and because obviously bows are complicated, how the limbs fit in. So because of how I'm having to stand, I'm pulling the string into my body, which you don't really want to do, but I can't really get away with it because of how I'm kind of collapsed in a bit.
So you found a way to adapt to make it fit like your unique needs.
Absolutely.
So going from like this being a hobby, how did you then get to Olympic level?
So in the club level, clubs themselves hold inter-club competitions. So every Sunday, my club would choose a round to shoot, either a metric round, which is Olympic, Paralympic round, or an imperial round, which is the old, English one. So they've got names for it, like a York or a Windsor, and they're different distances, and men shoot a further distance and women shoot a shorter distance. And also depending on what bow type you have, because also there's long bows and people who shoot bare bow. So there's all, the clubs cater for a whole lot of different types. So you would shoot within the club, and then we would have a club champs at the end of the summer. So beginning of September, we'd have a club championship. So, you start doing it that way. And then, once you start scoring good, and obviously the more you shoot, the better you get, the more you practice, then you start doing local competitions. And then you go out a bit wider where it's maybe like all of Surrey or all of Cheshire that has a competition. And then you can go to the national level. So as long as you're with a club, you can shoot at a national level.
And so you went from there, from like doing those clubs, and like did you find they were looking for people to compete in 2012, or did you? How did you get to the actual Olympics?
So I was doing a national competition, and it was at Lilleshall, and that's where the national teams are based.
Right.
You get to know archers as you go along, and you see them at different ones. And there was a husband and wife. So the husband was the coach, and the wife was on the Paralympic team. And they were just like, yeah, we've watched you shooting, and you should consider this. And I'm like, I don't have a disability. And they're both laughing, and they're like, you do? I'm like, no, I don't. And they're like, you do? And I'm like, look, I just have arthritis. That's just a me problem. And they're both kind of like, that's a disability. That counts as a disability that you can classify on. And I'm like, what? And of course, I didn't know a whole lot about it. So I'm like, well, but I'm not in a wheelchair. And they're like, you don't have to be in a wheelchair. You just need to have a classifiable condition. And then my then boyfriend, who was, on the squad, they were having a talent ID weekend. And so he's like, call up Helen, who was a national coach. And I'm like, no, because I won't classify. And so I'll just be making a fool of myself, and people will be thinking that I'm trying to, cheat my way on or something like that. I'm like, no. And he just got on the phone and just handed. I knew Helen. So I'm like, hi, talent ID. And she's like, great, all for it. And I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, absolutely. And she's like, even if nothing comes from it, you get a free weekend of shooting at the National Sports Center. So I went to the talent ID, and, my arthritis was kicking off, and my ankle would, lock up. And this is exactly what my worry was like, oh, I'm just making a fool out of myself. So they left me for last because I have a hidden disability. Yeah. So they're going to have to check everything out. So, okay, that's fine. So I went in, and, it took about an hour and a half to go through everything. And she's like, first off, you need to make an appointment with the GP because there's something wrong with that knee. I'm like, my knees are the only thing that works. And she's like, no, there's something wrong with that knee. And she was right. And she'd been doing this for like 40 years. So she could clock what was wrong with
it. She knows what she's talking about.
She knows what she's talking about. And so I'm like, okay. And she was absolutely right. I did go to the GP, and they're like, yes, it's like old rope and crab meat in there. So she's just like, as of today, you would classify in the most disabled group. And I'm just like, pardon me? And she's like, yes, in the W1, even though there's no W1 classification at that time, there was no W1 for women. So she's like, you would be in the W2, which is wheelchair users. I'm like, but I don't use a wheelchair. And she's like, you could shoot from a wheelchair. And I'm like, but I don't use a wheelchair. And that took a lot for me to think. So I'm like, okay, I guess people have shooting wheelchairs, even if they don't use wheelchairs to walk around, but your disability allows for it. And she said, however, because of your arthritis, it fluctuates. So you probably won't stay in this group. But for today, you do classify. And she said, and you will always classify because you don't have the full, so they have a grading system. Yeah. For like how far your joints will move or your muscles will move. And she's like, because, your limbs and your joints don't move the full range that they should, and they never will. So she's like, you will probably classify in the standing category, She's like, however, and I'm like, okay, well, that's good because standing, that's how I've always done it. And she said, yes, but your legs are different lengths. So I would suggest you get a block for one of your legs so that your hips are more even, and that'll help you. And that's allowed because, on that particular day, I was in the most disabled group, and I got it, written out to say I could use a block under my foot. So it was all legal, nobody could question it. So when I went out to see the head coach, like jaw dropped when I said, like, I'm a W1. And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, I've got problems with all of my limbs. So yeah. So I'm going to be internationally classified at a shoot that was happening in about 6 months. So it was at Stoke Mandeville, where it's the home of the Paralympics. So they're like, you definitely classify. So I told the head coach, told other people who were, waiting, and we went from there. So the following year, at that same shoot at Stoke Mandeville, I went, as an independent to shoot the national champ. So I shot my socks off. I shot a personal best and got into a medal final match. So I was in for the bronze medal. And the bronze medal is the hardest medal to win because if you lose, you get nothing. You are in a gold medal match, you at least get a silver. When you're in bronze medal, you lose, bye-bye, nothing. Nobody mentions you. Yeah. So it's, and we had a storm coming. I've never shot in worse weather. The rain was coming down so hard that I almost couldn't see the target. And there were loads of people behind me from the GB team and from some foreign teams as well that I'd made friends with. I ended up winning. And boy, that international archer was angry. And I'm just like, because, I'm a nobody. I'm an independent. I'm not even on an international team. So I imagine that's very, very difficult, but her coach was so lovely. They were from the Czech team.
People's competitive nature is different, isn't it? So
exactly.
Some people just don't take loss very well.
Yeah. And we didn't know each other. We hadn't met before. So, and the coach is like, don't worry, she's having a hard day. So don't take it personally. And he was really lovely. And then I was able to turn around for all the people that were cheering. And I was like, oh my God, there are a lot of you here. I was thinking it was maybe like 6 people, but it was like the whole group. And I was like, and they were all hugging me. And I'm just like, wow. And then the coach came up to me and said, how would you like to have a trial when we go to the Czech Republic and you can shoot in international? And I'm like, yes, please. Yes, please. And, and it was a test to go to that international because even though I was wearing a GB top, I wasn't part of the team. Even though I knew everybody on the team, I'm not officially part of the team. This is a test for me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So actually, I said another thing to mention on this as well. Like, with having arthritis, how did you manage to regulate your training and stuff like that? Like if you were having a flare-up day, or if you were, because obviously you still need to train a certain amount. So how did you manage that?
So, this is where pacing comes in. And at the time, I had a friend I used to see an osteopath on a regular basis. And he was an ex-rugby player. So, I explained what I was doing. So I would go and see him maybe twice a month. And then a person on his staff was my friend, and she was a massage therapist training to be a GP. So, so she understood it. And I had seen them before, when I was just doing sort of national level archery. So she kind of knew what to look for. And she could then advise me saying, be careful with this, try these stretches, because we don't want this issue to come back because it's a chronic one with you. She's like, this I just chase around your back and I never get rid of it. So she's like, so be careful doing this. carrying your bags. You're going to have to travel because I didn't drive at the time. So I'd have to go on the train to get up to the National Sports Center and then ring somebody and they would come collect me at the train station, or I'd take a cab if there was nobody available. But yeah, you'd have to carry your own stuff. So I had a rucksack because I figured that was more healthy than, trying to just carry things in my arms. So it's huge. And, you've got your aero tubes sticking up. So you got to make sure you're not bashing people. And when you're on national level, you need 2 of everything.
Just in case, don't you?
Yeah. So then your bag gets even bigger. And we had a doctor, and so we were being looked at. So if we twinged self, we could go over to the physio and say, I think I might have done something. Can you check it? And sometimes a massage was all we needed. We also had to go to the gym. So we had somebody there who was basically saying, well, we know what your limitations are, so stick to this. Don't try to do free weights, stay on the machines. Other people could do free weights because they were upper bodies and head didn't have an issue.
Yeah, it depends where your limitations are, doesn't it?
So. Yeah. So, it's like, we know that you can't do this, so we're going to adapt this movement so you can do that. A lot of stretchy band work. Resistance bands, because you can do just about anything with a resistance band.
Yeah, they're phenomenal.
And my rheumatologist, I made sure they knew about it, and so they're like, well, let's tweak your drugs. We'll put you on I had my painkillers changed, and I'm on the same painkiller now because it's so good. So that, that was good. And they're like, if, for instance, you're really sore after shooting 144 arrows round, then you can take an extra one of these in the evening. So I knew when I could take it, what I could take without, and you have to have your medications checked as well, because you can't be on something that's banned. And my GP wanted to put me on something that was banned. And I'm like, I'm going to have to wait until after the games. And she's like, no, I'd rather that you took it now. And I'm like, yes, but if we do, there is a protocol that you can go through, but you have to get many, I'd have to get her and my rheumatologist to sign a letter to say that there is no other medication that I can take for this, that they've tried everything, or that this is the only one that will work, and you have to make sure it's up to date. And I'm like, do you know what? I'd rather not go through that. There's a database that you can check all your drugs, but it's up to you. Everything you put in your body, you are responsible for.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you still compete these days, or are you still active in the sport?
Well, I'm not, and I wish I was, but I shoot around every day in my head. I'm always thinking about archery. I keep up with, people who are still shooting, the scores. Like I said, how I dislocated my shoulder.
Yeah.
When I was at London 2012, team manager and everything is like, well, if you're not competing, if you're not in a medal match, start to pack your bags, so that when it comes time, you don't have this huge thing to pack. So there was a short wardrobe, and I'm quite tall. So it wasn't like I was lifting my arms up at all, but my bag was on top. So I got it down. So I'm just now, I was thinking, lifting up again, taking that down, putting on, and I flicked a t-shirt and I was like, oh my God, with my other shoulder. I'm like, what did I do? So I go down to the medical center. And and these are like top people in the UK that have volunteered to do this. So, answering questions, they have your medical notes, so they know what's going on, and they're testing, try this. And I'm like, and so he's like, okay, we're going to go and we're going to have an ultrasound. They had the most up-to-date equipment there, their own little hospital. However, because I have metal in me, I wasn't allowed to go in that one because it's really, really strong. Right. So I had to go into the generic one, but that was fine. And they're like, it's not blood, it's inflammation, really, really bad. And they're like, you haven't torn your rotator cuff. However, it is incredibly inflamed, and something was wrong with one of the like tendon attachments. So they're just like, yeah, they're like that's what that is. So, I saw the physios and they were trying to do it, and, as best they could. And then the thing is, with the games is each sport gets what like a medal tally that they're trying to go for. And we were well below ours. So that meant your funding is then based off of that. So it meant our funding was going to get cut. So that meant people got cut. And since I was the last one in, I was the first one out, even though I had done really, really well. I mean, I'd only been on squad for 11 months, and I'd gone from nobody to doing really well. I finished 9th, so I was just outside, just getting into the medal matches. So I was kind of gutted about that, because everyone's like, oh, you've come so far, they'll keep you. And I was like, what? And I never kind of got an actual reason for why I was getting cut, but I just think it was last one in, first one
last
out,
in. It does make sense. That's probably it.
Yeah. So
it's harsh, but that's the way it often works, isn't it?
But I just said, I'll be back. And they said, well, we're in no doubt that you'll be back. However, then in 2013, they decided to change classification. So they're going to have to test everybody again. They're going to change the rules a bit. And they decided to kick arthritis out.
Oh, so you can't use arthritis as a disability for the Paralympics?
You can now, but as a secondary thing. You can't use it as a primary thing.
Wow.
Which I still think is wrong.
Yes, agreed.
Personally. Because, it affects, basically they say that whatever condition you have needs to directly affect your ability to do the sport. Mine directly affects my ability to do the sport.
That's infuriating sense of logic from there, though, isn't it? That doesn't make sense to me.
And to be honest, it wasn't just archery. That lots and lots of sports had some very controversial things happen, and people get cut from their squads. And I'm like, how can you cut that person from the squad? Some of it I just did not understand. So what happened after that sort of cull was that a lot of the classifiers from around the world were not happy with what happened. And so they said, we need a complete rewrite. So, and they let the athletes give their opinions on things. So, and it took many, many years, but they ended up coming up with sort of 2 rule books so that everybody knows, it's written out there, how they've picked the conditions, how the conditions affect you, what everybody is meant to be doing during a classification. Because I know when I went through the reclassification, it almost felt like, here's a hit list. Now, I can't say that's true or not, but that's how it felt.
So you're the victim of a transitionary period in their policies.
And as I say, it wasn't just me, and it wasn't just my sport. Lots and lots of athletes went through the same thing, and it was really kind of unfair. But at least they've gone back through and they've cleaned that up. So now everybody knows where they stand. Everybody knows what to expect. So I'm grateful for that, at least, that the people who are coming through now don't ever have to go through that again.
That's really good to hear. So you found an archery place when you went looking. How can people find support or organizations that are equipped for people with arthritis?
So there's Sport England. So you want to look for the grassroots. If you've never done a sport before and you're looking for a sport, Sport England is a great place. They're grassroots, and they're trying to get more people active. And then there's also Wheel Power. So Wheel Power is the grassroots disabled sport. so when you also want to look for, if you've got a specific sport in mind, go to the governing body in the UK. And there's usually a list of clubs or how you can get involved. There's always come and try days. And Paralympics GB also does a lot of come and try for parasports around the country. So you could look at that and see, you know, which ones are coming in. Obviously with the Paralympics, probably when the Paralympics is over, they will probably do those again.
Mm.
So you know, one of the things I would love to happen, and I've thought this for years, I don't know how to make it happen, but I would love to have an arthritis games, because there's games for amputees, there's games for transplants, there's games for specific, there's blind games. So for like
that would be great
conditions, I would love to have an arthritis games, not only to raise awareness for the types of arthritis, but also to show people with arthritis, because I think that's a big fear for people, that they're going to hurt themselves, they're going to make it worse. Yeah. But in general, when you can adapt something, and usually things are, really quite adaptable. I used like foam to protect my fingers on the string. Most people didn't do that, but we figured out a way that it wouldn't change that grip too much, but it cushioned my joints. So there's always something that you can do. But I would love an arthritis games just to not only show the world that people, so that they would know that there's hundreds of types of arthritis, and arthritis isn't just one thing, but also to show people with arthritis that you can still do things.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point as well, isn't it? Because as much as we advocate doing exercise, that's when sport becomes a bit different, because like, well, can I still compete? Can I still do these things? And you absolutely can. Like as like your story so like well shows that, you can compete at an Olympic level to do it. It's just, you've got to make those adaptations and those adjustments, and like say, find the way for you to adapt for the sport, or the sport to adapt to you, depending on which one it is as well.
Yeah.
So finally, what advice would you give then for someone who's no longer able to take part in a sport, maybe one they've already done, or maybe one they're just starting? Like, now that they have arthritis, what advice would you give to them?
So if somebody has arthritis and they can't do the one they want to do, or maybe because they have arthritis and maybe they don't want to adapt it, maybe they just want to try something else. I mean, you could do I do things like Qigong and Tai Chi, and that not only helps me physically, but helps me mentally as well. But like, I have a dog. Going for a dog walk, there's chair exercises, and I think especially when younger people get arthritis and they're just thinking, I don't want to use any mobility tools, I'm not old. Do you know what? There are people who are making walking sticks that are so cool. I met somebody who had one, and it was like acrylic, but it had all bubbles in there, and it has a light up thing in the bottom. So can you imagine that at night you have a lit up I mean, how cool is that?
I've seen some really awesome ones. A mate of mine has like matching walking sticks, and she looks incredible every time. Yeah.
So then it just becomes an accessory rather than a tool. And I think we all know that a lot of mobility companies still make things in like hospital gray, and they, and a lot of tools just look like they're for your granny. If they zhuzh them up and if somebody was out there who, it maybe is a designer, like at uni, and this is what you're doing, make some cool mobility aids.
Definitely.
If it's going to help you, if it's going to save that energy and that fatigue level for you, and so that you can do more stuff, so that you can do your sport, do it.
Couldn't agree more. And if you want to find out any more about as we've talked about gadgets, we've talked about activity, and we've talked about all this, please do go to our website, which is www.arthritisaction.org.uk. Or if you have any questions or want to, send us an email with anything you'd like to hear on the podcast, you can send that to podcast@arthritisaction.org.uk. So, Leigh, thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, and watch the Paralympics.
And watch the Paralympics. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.